Thanks to everyone for joining our next in our series of At Home with Holland Home webinar. I'm Michael Loughman, Director of Sales, and today we're thrilled to have our Chief Financial Officer, Adam Kinder, join us to talk about all things about the continuing care agreement. I think in an effort, our continued effort to be transparent, we've done this, we did this about 4 years ago. We just wanted to update it. The fundamentals of the CCA haven't changed. Some of the pricing has, and some of those figures, but the fundamentals of the continuing care agreement haven't changed since then. But it's time to update this, and so that's what we're doing today. Our next webinar in March is going to talk about the care navigation between independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing. We're going to be talking to a couple of our social services people here at Holland Home. So look for details on that coming up. As you have questions, if you want to type those into the Q&A box, not the chat box, then Adam and I can both see those, and we'll answer those probably at the end. We don't want to get too bogged down as we go. Some of the questions you type, we may answer along the way, just by nature of the conversation. I don't have anything else. Adam, do you have anything to add before we dive into this fun topic? We've got a very large number of people that RSVP for this, so no
Well, that's
pressure.
fantastic. Yeah, no, nothing else to add, really. You know, it's funny. The last time I remember us filming one of these or doing one of these was like 3 years ago, right? Ironically, if you go back and watch that one, I was wearing the exact same sweater as I am today. So I don't know what that means. Like I'm aging, but my wardrobe isn't. So we'll kind of see. We'll see how this goes.
Well, I think it just means you're like we are here at Holland Home. You're frugal and you're good with money. So
Oh my word. All
it
right,
also
let
means you
me.
have 3 kids at home. So
That's true too. So let me try and share my screen
all
real
right.
quick. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I just had a note, something about our volume. I'm at 100% here. So
Yeah,
um
as am I.
okay,
Yep.
very good.
I'll try and stay um I'll try and stay close to my computer a little bit. So if my face looks pretty big, sorry about that, but that's just trying to get my sound to carry. So uh if you're here, hopefully you'll learn a little bit about the continued care agreement. As Michael noted, the intent here is just to try and arm you all with some basics. We're not going to be able to answer probably all the specific questions you may have because some of your questions may be very specific. But again, the idea here is try and arm you with some context and some basic understanding. And hopefully this is something you can rewatch and share with family members or friends or what have you. Not everyone, I'll say this even at the start. We understand not everyone who is looking or exploring senior living options is going to end up choosing Holland Home. But even to that end, we view ourselves as a critical community resource, and we want to make sure that wherever you may eventually call home, hopefully it's Holland Home. We want to make sure that we've helped to support you along the way. So let's get into it. So a couple things, just broad overview, what I'll work my way through here over the next 45 minutes or so. We'll see if I can get there. Talk a little bit about Holland Home Christian Living Services, give you a little snippet, overview of our story, talk about the continued care agreement itself, some basics there, kind of what regulatory environment kind of overlays the CCA. That's what you hear us refer to it as, a CCA, stands for Continuing Care Agreement. Why is access to a place like Holland Home important? How entrance fees generally work, financial assistance, how that generally works, and then some other considerations along the way, and hopefully have some time for questions and answers at the end.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. So Michael, feel free to interrupt me at any point
Oh,
as well if you
I
have additional
I
things
appreciate the
to address.
invitation and I will
This
do
is
so.
interactive.
Yes,
Um,
right.
So Holland Home, founded in 1892, 133 years, young at this point, been in this community for a long time. We love where we call home. We love Grand Rapids. We love West Michigan. It is who we are. It is in our DNA. And so we are grateful that everyone you see here at our organization lives here in the greater Grand Rapids area. So we are all very much so accessible and locally focused for sure. Christian Living Services, and there's a slide later on where you kind of see a visual here. We founded that in 2007, and that kind of serves as a bit of a holding and governance structure, which overlays Holland Home and a number of other community-based services that you may or may not see, but that we've been invested in and involved in a very long time. So believe it or not, across all of Christian Living Services, we employ more than 1,500 folks. Probably about just under 1,000 of those are within the Holland Home kind of facility based vehicle there. Believe it or not, we actually serve a lot more people outside of our walls than inside of our walls. And so that speaks to the breadth and depth of our community services and how we've been focused on trying to care for as many people as possible wherever they call home. So what began 133 years ago as an organization focused on caring for widows, widowers in our communities who didn't have resources has now kind of blossomed into an organization that not only cares for probably about 1,500 to 2,000 folks on our campuses, but now we care for probably about another 8 to 10,000 out in the community through our other community-based services that aren't branded under Holland Home. So things like Faith Hospice, Atrial Home Care, all of those were kind of birthed out of and found their genesis in Holland Home. And as we looked at our mission and said, you know what, our mission doesn't exactly say where we're supposed to serve people, but it says that we serve with love and compassion, we commit to excellence, and we follow Christ's teachings and example in all we say and do. We go, well, that means we're gonna try and meet people where they are, and not everybody's gonna choose to move into Holland Home or want to choose to move into Holland Home. So this is just a slide that helps to introduce that. Again, our mission, absolutely critical. It is the heartbeat of who we are. Serving with love and compassion, committing to excellence, and following Christ's teachings and example in all we do. It is on all of our walls. It is on all of our halls. It is in our conference rooms. I tell new staff that I intentionally sit in our boardroom facing the mission statement. That's an intentional placement on my part, whether people realize that or not, because I want to make sure that as we're talking about whatever the issue is, the topic is, that the mission statement is physically in front of me. And that's not unique to me. That's consistent throughout everyone you find in leadership in our entire organization.
Yeah, and I think the important point on that, Adam, is that, as we've grown, as you've shown that growth at Holland Home, there's a lot of things here that have changed. The mission has not changed. And I don't ever see that changing. And I think the mission statement is why so many of us choose to work here and then later live here. So.
Yeah, personally, I love it. And this isn't a webinar on the mission statement, but I could do a webinar on how much I personally appreciate the mission statement and how it's manifest throughout how we make decisions and do what we do. And hopefully that's evident to the folks who see those decisions in our facilities and our current residents and our staff. But this slide just gives you a little visual. When I talk about Christian Living Services, you see Holland Home over there in the green. That's a wholly owned entity within Christian Living Services that contains all of our life plan communities. Kind of that midsection there, kind of the orangish. Those are other kind of wholly owned or controlled kind of organizations within Christian Living Services. So Faith Hospice is fully 100% owned or controlled through Christian Living Services. Reliance Community Care Partners, which is a Medicaid waiver agency, which has really had an explosive growth trajectory over the last decade or so, is a wholly owned component of Christian Living Services. And then Trillium Institute is fully philanthropically funded, and it's helped to really establish a more robust palliative care fellowship program for physicians in our community that's really helped to boost the profile of palliative care and hospice care among our physician population. And the hope there is that it's helped to improve quality of life for folks in our community. So that's all a part of the wholly owned components of Christian Living Services. Everything that's in blue there, those are non-wholly owned and affiliated. So Care Resources, that's a PACE program. We have a 40% stake in that. Tandem 365 Population Health Program, we have a 20% stake in that. And then AHWHH Home Care, actually the percentage needs to be updated. We actually have a 75% stake in AHWHH Home Care. Again, all of this was kind of birthed out of Holland Home and our intent to look around and say, who are we not serving and who might we be potentially equipped to serve? And we continue to ask that question of ourselves. And so all of this here, though, kind of falls under a lot of the management services and support services that Christian Living Services has. So HRIS, all of that stuff helps us support all of this stuff here. And so it's a really amazing and incredible kaleidoscope of services. Footprint wise, again, just to orient folks, because I got a captive audience, I'm going to do it. Christian Living Services physical footprint and where we serve people has continued to grow. So everything kind of in brown there, that's where Reliance has expanded to, which is amazing. That organization blows my mind every day. They serve thousands of folks in the state who are on Medicaid, helping them stay out of nursing facilities, transition out of nursing facilities, get access to the private duty care that they need to remain in their homes and address their immediate pressing care needs. It's an amazing organization. AHWHH, again, home care agency serving 6 counties in the west side of the state. Faith Hospice, primarily the west side of the state. Tandem 365 just got to the east side of the state this last year. Really amazing. So here's where I would just want to touch on kind of the breadth and depth, because you can kind of see the icons here of all this activity. This top half here, you have Holland Home, Bretton Woods, and Raybrook. Those are our 2 life plan community campuses. Each of those, beneath that, you have independent living, skilled nursing, assisted living, memory care, rehab. Our vibrant living program are all baked into each of those campuses. So each campus has access to all of that within that particular campus setting. And then that kind of section beneath that, you have Faith Hospice, which I talked a little bit about. You know, they serve, they're actually, oddly enough, they're one of the larger hospice agencies in West Michigan now, particularly that's unaffiliated with a hospital or health system. We serve well over 300 folks a day, more than 2,000 a year through Faith Hospice. They operate a really growing palliative care program. Some folks who are on might be familiar with Trillium Woods, which is another campus basically located in Byron Center, and that's where Faith Hospice is located. It on the upper level has a 20-bed kind of residential care hospice facility. On the lower level, that's where Faith Hospice now has built out a pretty significant bereavement and grief center, and that's where all of the staff that support everything that happens within Faith Hospice are now located. It's amazing. The team there just blows me away all the time. Reliance, I mentioned that organization previously, the explosive growth there. That's Medicaid waiver programs coordinated through the state of Michigan. Again, really incredible, amazing work that they do to really help to try and improve the quality of life for those who are poor, frail, elderly throughout our community. They do phenomenal work there. Dementia Institute, this is something that we started up just about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that. And it was, as we looked at what we were doing from a dementia care perspective, we've been doing memory care and dementia care for quite a long time within Holland Home. There's a growing sense that said, is there a way we can take what we know, try and continue to improve what we're doing in our own facilities, but then extend that out to folks in the community to get them access to kind of the resources that we might be able to bring to bear as far as dementia care resources for caregivers, and also extending that to individuals in our community who, given their roles, might find themselves interacting more and more with individuals who are either caring for someone with dementia or having a memory care issue, or frankly have dementia or a memory care issue. And so that extends out to how can we better support clergy? How can we better support our emergency responders so that when they're responding to situations, they can try and differentiate between somebody who is having a behavioral health episode versus somebody who has been diagnosed with dementia, and how to address either one of those. So that's been something that's been this evolution over the last year and a half. We're pretty excited about it. We're still finding its niche in our community, but it's really intended to help us get better at what we do, but then also help bring those resources to bear for the broader community as well. I talked a little bit about Trillium Institute. Collaborative Care Partners down there at the bottom, Care Resources. That's a PACE program of all-inclusive care for the elderly. Really amazing program. They serve about 350 plus folks a day in that program, and that really is a wraparound program. It takes the Medicare Medicaid benefit and really provides kind of wraparound care for everyone enrolled in that program. AHWHH Home Care. We've been in home care for a really long time, probably almost 40 years now. But a number of years ago, we smashed up or combined a number of home care agencies between Clark, Rest Haven, and Holland Home, and said, well, what if we tried to do this together? Because home care, I could do a long presentation of this. Home care is a really challenging space to operate in. It's a really challenging space from a reimbursement perspective, from a staffing perspective. But they serve well over 500 folks a day through AHWHH Home Care. And then Tanner 365, it's a population health organization that really, as a five-way partnership, helps take people who are in kind of socioeconomic situations in which they tend to lean on the emergency department as their primary care vehicle, and instead partners them up with case managers, social workers, embedded community paramedics, so that instead of them going to the emergency department, they simply call one of those case managers, and we're able to send a community paramedic unit out to help triage the situation and keep them from actually needing to go to the emergency department for kind of an unnecessary reason. And so that's been wildly successful. It's an amazing program. So this is just it's a vertical page that shows all these icons, and for most of you, you're like, I don't think I care about all this. But what this reflects to me is how seriously we take our mission, and that we listen for sometimes the quiet voice, sometimes it's a louder voice that's calling us to specific spaces. And we try and hold the resources that we've been entrusted with relatively loosely to say, how can we help continue to further this mission that we've been so generously called into, and translate that into meaningful resources for our community.
Yeah, and I think, Adam, the point is that while this is a webinar on the continuing care agreement for Holland Home, I think that the point is that when you come into Holland Home, you're part of a much bigger um, healthcare system. So people may have heard of Faith Hospice, they may have heard of Atria. Well, that we're all in the family together, so I think that's the point. And I
Yeah.
also think it's a point of the strategy that Holland Home has taken through the years of diversifying and not having all of our eggs in one basket, but not only from serving people, but also from a revenue perspective, and trying to insulate ourselves from, the market changes that can happen.
Yep, exactly. So that's all I'll say about Christian Living Services and the breadth and depth of what we do. So Holland Home, I mentioned this previously. We operate 2 life plan communities in the greater Grand Rapids area. In a national ranking of the top 200 nonprofit multi-site senior living providers, we rank 67th in the country as far as size. We have a Fitch rating of BBB minus, investment grade. Of the 4,000 plus communities nationwide, there's probably less than 200 that actually have a Fitch rating. We're really proud of that fact. It is a point of great organizational pride that we have recurring surveillance and discussions with Fitch about how we're doing financially. You can see our unit mixes and counts at the bottom. We have a little over 1,200 units across the whole organization, mostly in independent living, about 760 and then about 280 in combined AL and memory care, and about 159 in skilled nursing. So key thing to note here is that the continuing care agreement is governed and ultimately regulated by the Continuing Care Community Disclosure Act of 2014, which replaced a previous act, the Living Care Disclosure Act of 1976. So what the act in 2014 did was it simply just updated what had been in 1976 up until that point. The act's purpose is really to help protect and establish a regulatory environment around the continuing care agreement. There's a story that leads into why this was necessary. But ultimately, it helps to prohibit, fraudulent practices, right? So you don't have somebody who says, "Hey, sign a continuing care agreement," they take your money and they run and they never deliver. It requires a certain level of regulatory responsibility from our part, extended back to the state of Michigan, right? I have a regulator that I report to on the continuing care agreement, and then there are penalties if we don't meet the standards established in the act and in our reporting requirements to the state. So every year, Holland Home every year has an active dialogue with the state of Michigan. We're required to submit a whole slew of documents and documentation and a renewal application to the state that says, this is everything that's in our CCA. This is what we're thinking about changing or tweaking or updating. These are our rates. This is how they compare. We kind of have to give them a pretty deep peek under the hood in order to get a renewal. If we don't get the renewal, we have to stop selling continuing care agreements. So that's how serious this is. We take the renewal incredibly seriously. We don't take it for granted at all. We have conversations with our regulator throughout the course of the year. If we have particular questions on things, he'll check in every once in a while and say, "Hey, how are things going?" And it's an excellent relationship we have with them, which is really, really helpful. But that's something to note, is that continuing care agreements are regulated by the state of Michigan. So there's actually 32 continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs, sometimes referred to as life plan communities, registered in the state of Michigan. So there's 32 that are ultimately regulated under that Continuing Care Disclosure Act. Anybody who's not, if you're not a registered CCRC, then you're not regulated under the act. There's none of those securities protections. So some of us have been providing care long before the original act of 1976 was once instituted. To date, there's about 11,000 IL, AL, and skilled nursing beds that are covered within continuing care retirement communities. We make up about 10 to 11% of the total units across all existing CCRCs right now. This is a laundry list of them. You might recognize a few names. Believe it or not, there's a heavy concentration in West Michigan. You can see the first 12 there are all concentrated in West Michigan. You have several in Grand Rapids, Jenison, Holland, Kalamazoo area. So pretty well saturated and well articulated market here on the west side of the state. Every prospective resident who's interested in entering into a continuing care agreement should receive a disclosure statement long before they are presented with a continuing care agreement to sign. And so what that disclosure statement ultimately is it's viewed a little bit like a prospectus. The idea here is that the disclosure statement helps to do exactly that, disclose certain details on the community, financial performance, who's on the executive leadership team. A lot of the components that you're going to find in the continuing care agreement are included in the disclosure statement. And so it's really important that you get this before you're even remotely close to a point at which you're signing a continuing care agreement, because we encourage people to take the disclosure statement, digest it, ask questions, use it to talk with any advisors you have around you, lawyers, attorneys, financial advisors, family, friends, whose opinions and feedback that you trust. So we encourage folks to take that disclosure statement and consult with advisors, and then use that to ask questions off of. this is what the disclosure statement is ultimately going to say, typically page one. Right? So the purchase of a CCA involves and may involve a high degree of risk, right? There's a financial transaction at play. There's kind of a future benefit at play. And so it's going to clearly spell that out. It's going to say, hey, we really encourage you to seek the advice of an attorney or a financial advisor. We strongly encourage people. We don't want folks to have a sense that they were rushed into a continuing care agreement or that they had unanswered questions that were unclear to them. We want good clarity for residents as they're coming in so that they know confidently, yep, I understood what I was signing, made sense to me. And they've gotten the appropriate advice of those that they feel they needed to before entering into an agreement. Entrance fees themselves. Yeah, Michael, you're gonna say something?
No, this is literally the second paragraph,
Yeah,
the continuing on the disclosure statement. So like when you open the cover, this is the first thing you're going to see because we want you to come in eyes wide open. That's why we give you the disclosure way in advance. It's why we encourage you to get outside counsel because what's going to govern our relationship while you live here is the continuing care agreement. And so we want everyone to come in with as full a knowledge as possible about what living in a continuing care community like Holland Home is.
that's right. A couple other things to note. Entrance fees are subordinate to any mortgages we have on the property, right? So you take a second position. And no person ultimately is authorized to make any promise in connection with something that's otherwise explicitly stated in the disclosure statement. So really, the summation of that is rely on the disclosure statement of the continuing care agreement, not on what someone says. So the continuing care agreement itself, we really say the CCA provides for really two basic items. One, residents going to have access to nursing care or other facilities on the basis of priority for somebody who's not a resident of Holland Home. Like that's what it explicitly provides for. The second thing it explicitly provides for is it says, hey, if a resident happens to outlive their resources, Holland Home will waive or reduce to the extent necessary the fees that would otherwise be due. So that's really the two things the CCA explicitly provides for. And for most folks, the second component here, the risk of exhausting resources, may not be a strong consideration for you. For others, it's somewhat of a concern behind the scenes. I can say definitively today, there's probably about 150 to 170 residents residing at Holland Home, mostly in assisted living and skilled nursing, who are not able to pay or cover the full cost of their care. And we take that provision in the continuing care agreement extremely seriously. So I'm just going to pause on this for a second. And there's a section later on where we talk about financial assistance. But I think this is a fine space to pause on this. This is a strong component of who Holland Home is, was, and will always continue to be, is that we desire to care for people regardless of whether they can continue to pay for the cost of their care once they're in Holland Home. So again, 150 to 170 people at any given point in time not able to cover the full cost of their care. That adds up to about just under or right around $5 million a year in care that we're delivering that folks aren't able to cover the full cost of. You say, well, how can you make that happen? Well, we have a strong donor constituency. We have strong community support, and they have continued to remember Holland Home and this promise and commitment that we've made to each and every one of our residents that we're going to care for you no matter what. Once you're in, we're caring for you no matter what. As long as you don't give away all your money and all your resources and intentionally impoverish yourself, we're gonna care for you. So that's an important distinction as to who we are. But again, for most folks, that's not a critical consideration. It's really that primary of access to nursing care and our additional facilities that you may eventually need access to, whether it's assisted living or memory care. So why is access to a place like Holland Home ultimately important? So there's a lot happening on this page. So when you look at our nursing ratio, hours per resident day, we're at about 4.2. What's interesting is I went back and when I looked at this presentation 3 years ago, it was almost the exact same number for Holland Home. So our commitment from an hours per resident day perspective has remained unchanged. So quality is our primary focus in everything we do. You can look at where some other comparable facilities, these are national statistics to the left of that blue box over there, for profits, just around 3.1, other nonprofits right around 3, government 3.3, total of everybody's about 3.1. So this is, well, for most of you, you're not thinking about skilled nursing. This is a big part of who Holland Home ultimately is. Oddly enough, if you looked at what our hours per resident day is in our assisted living, it's close to 3.23, which is almost at the state requirement for skilled nursing. And so we take our staffing levels very seriously. It is a primary driver of making sure we have critical capacity in our facilities and we're able to deliver the level of care that we promised to all of you. So that's a key reason why access to a place like Holland Home becomes really important. So a couple other things to note here. So skilled nursing, about 75% of all of our skilled nursing rooms are private rooms. There's an asterisk next to that because we've been effectively operating most of our rooms as private rooms. We have a number of them that are licensed for dual occupants, otherwise known as semi-privates, but we've really been operating those primarily as privates effectively since 2020. There's some that occasionally we operate as semi-privates, but from a care perspective, we've not told staff in the facility, yep, fill up all the semi-privates. We're trying to keep them as privates for as much as we possibly can, and we just convert them or leverage the semi-private status if we need a little bit of temporary overflow in case we have a couple sudden admissions that we just need to find a temporary spot for. Assisted living, 100% private rooms. I actually couldn't believe that anybody had semi-private rooms in assisted living until I did a little research and I found that those actually do exist. But we have 100% private rooms there. Same thing, memory care, 100% private rooms there. Another point of humble pride for the organization is that we were the first designated organization in the state of Michigan to get TIPA SNO's positive approach to care. We are really appreciative to TIPA SNO and her organization for all that she and her organization has helped us continue to do to elevate the level of memory care that we're providing. Another element here is that all of our staff go through a thing called dementia training. I went through it. Michael's gone through it. I should say dementia journey training. We've all gone through that, in which we experience a little bit what it's like to live as somebody with some cognitive decline. So it's a really unique experience. You put on specific kinds of gloves. You wear certain kinds of goggles that make it hard to see things. We have to try and do certain tasks. It really helps to develop and cultivate a deep sense of empathy across all of our staff, regardless of where they're serving, for those who may be experiencing cognitive decline or dementia. A couple other things here of why access to our facilities is important. So the population that we serve is continuing to grow somewhat explosively. So if you look at the population that's 80 plus, it's going to effectively double over the next kind of 15 years at this point, which is not insignificant. Beyond that, a primary concern, at least that we have, and we've started to experience this a little bit. COVID was a bit the great revealer here. But as the 80 plus population is growing, we're not getting an equivalent growth in the number of available caregivers. So looking backwards in 2020, you'd say of the population age 45 to 64, we call that kind of the caregiver support population. Compared to the population 80 plus, there were 6.3 persons in that 45 to 64 age group for every person over age 80. By the year 2035, that drops to 3.5. Today we're at 5.2, quickly approaching 4.1. So what we're going to see is as the population 80 plus continues to kind of explode in growth, the number of available caregivers is actually going to start to do the opposite, and it's going to fall, which means a lot more pressure is going to fall on unpaid caregivers. And one thing I tell people is that even if you can afford to bring in-home care, you may actually not find it available. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And I can say that because I can see the pressure that our in-home home care agency has already felt from a labor perspective. And that's where when you think about it, in-home care is one-to-one. In facility care, you can stretch that one person over maybe four persons. And so that's where, from a caregiver support perspective, more folks, as much as they want a desire to stay in their home, might actually find that exceptionally challenging unless they depend on unpaid caregivers. Which there's just a study that came out just this last week from Johns Hopkins and University of Michigan that said the number of unpaid caregivers, family caregivers from 2021 to 2022 or 23 increased something like 32%. And so we're seeing a lot more pressure put on family and friends in the unpaid caregiver kind of sandwich. And that's what's going to ultimately, unfortunately, help bridge the gap here. So entrance fees kind of pivot here. So that's kind of the some of the demographic realities that kind of present Holland Home and facilities like Holland Home as somewhat attractive options for folks to consider moving into, and some of the realities that I think folks are going to start to face over the next decade or 2 decades as our population who needs care continues to grow at a rate that we haven't seen in quite some time. Entrance fees, we typically have 3 entrance fee plans. We have a 4th available for Breton Homes North. Everywhere else on our campuses, there's 3 available. And there's 2 components to an entrance fee. There's a non-refundable component and a refundable amount. So when you go to enter into a continuing care agreement, there's a entrance fee attached to that continuing care agreement, which there's 2 components to that fee. It's what unit type is it, and what entrance fee plan are you selecting? And that's ultimately going to drive the entrance fee amount that you're going to be asked to pay. The non-refundable amount, I tell people to think of that kind of as their cost. The refundable amount, that's effectively the part you're going to get back when you vacate your unit. So that's, as we think about entrance fees, remember there's basically 2 pieces. There's non-refundable and there's refundable. Non-refundable effectively represents your cost. Refundable represents the amount that you're ultimately going to get back when you vacate the independent living unit. So here's a couple illustrations. I pulled a couple. So Breton Terrace, there's a Bayberry floor plan. This is a 1-bedroom unit. The difference here in entrance fee plans is that depending on the plan you pick, the total entrance fee amount is going to be different. So if you pick a plan that's 75-25, so 75% non-refundable, 25% refundable. So it's 25% of that's going to come back to you. 75% of this, if you live in that unit long enough, is going to be fully earned and recognized by Holland Home and won't be refundable back to you. So in this particular case, it's about $190,000 entrance fee, about $143,000 of that's the non-refundable, about $47,000 of that's refundable. 50-50, self-explanatory, half and half. So the entrance fee is $224,000. Half of that would come back to you when you vacate. Half of that, assuming you live there long enough, would be fully earned by Holland Home. In the 35-65, that's where 65% of the entrance fee, in this case, the entrance fee is higher, close to $250,000, but more of it comes back to you versus the part that's non-refundable. So you can see, if you look at that second number in each of these, 47,600, 112,000, 161,779. So it's really a function of how much do you want to pay in your entrance fee is a driver of what your ultimate kind of cost is going to be, or what your refund is at the end of the day. So that's kind of the basics on entrance fees. There's another example here, Dorado, 2-bedroom. Functionally, it works the exact same way. It's 75-25, 50-50, 35-65. The second number in that is always the refundable portion back to you. The first number is that non-refundable fees. Think of it as your cost. Entrance fee ranges. People always ask, like, where are you at from an entrance fee perspective? So from our lowest entrance fee to our highest entrance fee on our Rayburg campus, in estates to Electra under the 75-25 plan, about 95,200 entrance fee, versus the highest entrance fee on our Rayburg campus is in estates to Cygnus which is the 3565 plan for about $496,670. On the Bretton Woods campus, the lowest entrance fee plan we have there is a Bretton Terrace Aspen unit. Under the 7525, that's about 154,700, all the way up to a 1585 for Bretton Homes North Laurel, which is about 995,000. Now keep in mind that's 1585, so 85% of that's coming back to that person. So you can kind of see there's a pretty broad range in entrance fees that are available to folks. And here's a little interesting nugget. If you've been paying attention, you've seen maybe perhaps that our entrance fees have gone up maybe a little bit more so the last couple of years than maybe historic averages. What's fascinating here, there's a lot on this page, but if you looked at what our weighted average 50/50 entrance fee is at the beginning of this year, it's about $293,000. If you look at it as a percentage of the average home sale value in Kent County, it's just under 75% of the average home sale value in Kent County. It's about 45% of all of our 50/50 entrance fees across all of our independent living units have an entrance fee of $300,000 or below. So that's at that 50/50 level. The chart that's really telling is the chart beneath here. And so that blue line represents the average home sale value in Kent County over the last 14 years. The black line or dark line beneath that one is what our average 50/50 entrance fee has been over that same period of time. And you can see back 14 years ago, our average 50/50 was actually more than the average home sale value in Kent County. And somewhere in 2016, 2017, those lines crossed, and then the average home sale value took off on us. And you can see the spread between those. So when people go, how come you're increasing entrance fees so much? Like, well, look at the delta between average home sale values in Kent County and where our average 50/50 is. And then people say, yeah, but I'm not buying real estate. Yes, that's true. But there's a component here that says, what would it cost us? So this is the fundamental question we started to ask ourselves. What would it cost us to build these same units today? And the reality is that we couldn't build a 2-bedroom Dorado unit for what we were potentially going to get in an entrance fee. And so if fundamentally what that meant was if we ever built more of that unit type, we would ultimately be cannibalizing ourselves. And so we needed to be cognizant and sensitive to how much of the average home sale value in Kent County is real versus speculative, meaning how much would it cost to build that same home today? And reality is we know this because we've been building units. We know how much more units cost today to build than they used to. So Homes North is a great example. When we started to build Homes North units in 2016, 2017, they cost about $160 a square foot. By the time we finished building the last one about a year and a half ago, it was costing about $260 a square foot to build the exact same thing we were building just 8 years prior. And so we know that much of the run-up or increase in home sale value is also very much so supported by the actual cost to replace that home at this point. So the thing we point out too is the delta between average home sale value and average 50/50 is still pretty significant, much more significant than it's probably ever been in Holland Home's history if you went back to 2021 and prior. So the value you can unlock in exchanging your home for an entrance fee has never been more significant than it is today. A few things to note from an entrance fee adjustment perspective. There's a couple of things you can add or might be add-ons or additional components to some of the units that are out there. So for Bretton Terrace, Bretton Ridge, Estates 1, Estates 2, you can add or remove kind of a garage or a carport access as part of those. For Bretton Homes and Raybrook Homes, there's different kind of components to those. In some cases, the lower levels have been finished. In some cases, the porches have been converted to 3-season rooms or 4-season rooms, and various other things. Some of the homes have generators that have been attached to them. Some do not. So those are all kind of variables in some of those entrance fees. Question we get sometimes is on second person fees. This is a common one. And so in our case, when we look at a second person, it's either or. So when there's two persons moving into an independent living unit, you either pay $30,000 one time, which is non-refundable and it effectively gets earned by Holland Home over the course of about 7.5 years or so. Six and two-thirds
Five
years.
and a half. Five and a half.
What am I saying? 5.5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, 5.5. Thank you, Michael. I'm looking at the paragraph below, so I'm
Yeah.
confusing myself. But it ultimately gets earned over the course of about 5.5 years by Holland Home, or you can pay $350 a month for as long as that second person resides in that independent living unit. So the joke here has always been two spouses need to look at each other real hard and say, what do you think? The $350 per month is not a payment plan up to $30,000. You pay the $350 per month for as long as that person lives there, even if that means it ends up costing you more than $30,000 over the life of that person living there. So it's an either or. You don't pay both. It's not a $30,000 entrance fee plus $350 a month. It's either a $30,000 entrance fee for that second person or $350 a month for as long as that second person resides there. And then the minute that person's not residing there anymore, that $350 per month comes off. So that's a key decision folks need to make. Some communities do both, and it's a entrance fee and a monthly. Some are similar to us, so it's a consideration as you're thinking about things and looking at things. A couple things here to note on the non-refundable component. So the way Holland Home, I'm going to get a little in the weeds for a second. So I'm sorry if I lose somebody, I'll try and bring you back here. But ultimately, the non-refundable is treated effectively like a prepayment for future care. And so the way Holland Home recognizes that in our financial statements is that we recognize it over the estimated lifespan of the resident, which means in exchange, residents often can consider the non-refundable portion of their entrance fee in the year they pay it as a medical expense for income tax deduction reasons. And so that's a weird little nuance thing. The sales team can help walk through that. We provide a little bit of guidance and feedback on that. Again, we don't provide tax advice. We always encourage folks to consult with their tax advisor, but we have found that because of how that non-refundable piece works, a portion of that is potentially deductible as a medical expense in the year that it's paid. The other thing to note is a non-refundable amount for the purpose of residents is Holland Home earns that at a rate of 1.5% per month. So basically, after the course of about 5.5, close to 6 years, that amount becomes fully earned by Holland Home, and no portion of that is refundable back to the resident. But if the resident were to leave or vacate that unit prior to that amount being fully earned by Holland Home, any amount that wasn't fully earned by Holland Home prior to about that 6-year window of time would be refundable back to the resident. Most folks live with us in independent living on average close to 10 years. Just depends on their health, move in, more than one person in the unit, all that kind of stuff. Couple things to note here, particular to that non-refundable amortization or the earning of it on the part of Holland Home. This is where we encourage people to kind of look at the various disclosure statements you may be getting from other communities, because in some cases, communities might say, on Holland Home's case, we say, we just take the non-refundable piece, and that's what we recognize at 1.5% per month, which means after, again, 67 months, so call it 5.5, 6 years, it becomes fully Holland Homes. Versus some communities will take the whole entrance fee, amortize it as 1.5% per month, and ultimately recognize that non-refundable amount much faster than Holland Home would, because they're amortizing under a much bigger dollar amount. So ultimately, they kind of recognize that non-refundable twice as fast as Holland Home. So in some cases, it becomes fully earned by that community in 2-3 years, versus in Holland Home's case, it's 5 to 6 years. It becomes fully earned by Holland Home. So that's a little nuance to kind of pay attention to in some of those disclosure statements and continuing care agreements with other communities as you're looking around and kind of trying to compare apples to apples. Now the refundable amount, so pivot from the non-refundable to the refundable. This is the amount that would come back to you. at the time you vacate. The independent living unit's vacated. So with the exception of Breton Homes North, the refund is due back to the resident within about 9 months, 275 days from the date the unit is ultimately vacated. So what drives a vacate? Residents moving to another level of care, assisted living, skilled nursing. They voluntarily terminated their CCA and they're leaving Holland Home. We don't have many of those. Or the resident has passed away. In the case of Breton Homes North, instead of it being 9 months, it's 18 months. It's a much larger entrance fee. We're trying to sell and convert somebody back into that unit. Now, I should say that that's the longest it will take to get a refund. In some cases, if we happen to have kind of resold that particular unit, that floor plan that person was in, and the incoming resident is in there sooner than that 9 months, that resident will get the refund sooner than 9 months. So it's whichever comes first, basically 9 months, or when a new resident moves into that particular unit. The refundable amount that you get back is going to be reduced by two things. Going to be reduced by sales fee, which is 6% of the entrance fee, and refurbishment charge, which is 4% of the entrance fee. That's all disclosed to you at the time that you move in, so it's pretty clear to you. Within your continuing care agreement, this is how much you're going to get back. So it's not like you don't ever see that. We try and show that to you at the outset when you're entering into your continuing care agreement, because these are fixed percentages. We have a pretty good window as to exactly what the refundable amount is going to be that comes back to you. Some of that might get adjusted if refurbishment comes in below a threshold, that type of thing. Some things to note here, again, this is in comparison to other communities. Some communities, so the 2024 Act that I referenced when we first started, actually allows communities potentially to hold the refund until the unit's resold again. And so they could easily be holding onto that refund for a year, year and a half, 2 years, depending on how long it takes them to resell that unit. A few kind of last things here, elements of the CCA. So right to occupancy. So occupancy is limited to the person or persons named on the agreement. So only the persons who are party to the agreement have ultimately a right to occupy that particular unit. From a marriage perspective, so if you're someone who comes in single, you marry someone, they have to meet some age requirements. That spouse can be added to the continuing care agreement. This sounds weird, but you can only add one spouse to the CCA. So if you come in married, your spouse passes away, you can get remarried and they can get added to the agreement. But if that spouse happens to pass away and you marry somebody else, then I don't think we've really ever encountered that. But the point here is not to enable people to perpetuate the continuing care agreement simply by continuing to marry and remarry there. So we try and limit it to one-time addition of a second person. The second person could also mean a sibling, potentially. We have siblings who come in together. But the understanding here is, so there's a couple of things. I should take a pause because I think this is an important point. Holland Home's not a party to a prenup. So if you have a division of assets, when the two of you sign the continuing care agreement, you're covenanting together, right? And we are presuming that you are agreeing to cover one another and the costs that each of you may incur while you're residents of Holland Home. That's what you're covenanting to in the continuing care agreement. So we're not a party to your prenup. We don't know what's in there. We don't need to know what's in there. The state of Michigan's not either. When it comes to Medicaid eligibility, they're not a party to a prenup either. So we approach it very similarly to how the state does. Again, sometimes we have siblings that'll enter into a CCA together, and we say the same thing to them. We say you are jointly liable for one another in this particular case. So you're agreeing to cover one another and one another's costs at Holland Home to the extent that you're able to. Ownership, Holland Home retains ownership of the living unit. The CCA doesn't give you ownership title. There's no title exchange over the real estate. It's simply when you enter into the CCA, it is simply a continuing care agreement. There's no real estate tied to it. Again, access to licensed facilities of Holland Home. That's ultimately one of the primary vehicles the CCA ultimately gives you access to. The thing to note here is that as you move through our respective levels of care, so you go from independent living to assisted living to skilled nursing, there's not an additional entrance fee that you have to pay. You paid your entrance fee when you moved into independent living. There's not an additional one at every exchange or every move through our transitions of care. Again, I kind of referenced this, but ultimately that CCA is giving you priority access to skilled nursing, assisted living, memory care as you need it. So a lot of it offers pretty significant peace of mind. So you don't have to wonder where you're going to go if and when you need assisted living or memory care, or your spouse does, or skilled nursing care. You know exactly ultimately where you're going to find a spot. So you're not going to have to search or wonder where you might need to find that additional level of care. From a refund perspective, so when it does come time to issue a refund, if the resident is still alive, the refund will be made out directly to the resident. If the resident or residents who are party to the CCA have passed away, we'll make the refund out to the estate of, and ultimately we try and have residents kind of sign an addendum which assigns the refundable amount to any living trust that they might have, in which case we can make the refund out to them. Financial assistance, I kind of briefly touched on this earlier, but ultimately, this is a component of the continuing care agreement. What it effectively says is our expectation is that every resident will do their best to cover the costs as they incur them. But if there is a real possibility that they may be exhausting their resources, we have folks on our finance team who they could speak with, who hold everything in strictest confidence. Virtually no one in the facility knows residents who are on resident assistance, and we like to keep it that way. I don't have a list. I don't know and memorize the names of residents who are on assistance. That's quite intentional on my part. I don't need to know that. I can look it up if I need to, but it's not something that ultimately I dwell on. Ultimately, each situation we evaluate based on the unique circumstances that the resident finds themselves in. Really, the intent here, though, is that the resident has exhausted potential public assistance that might be available to them. Again, we have members on our team who help coordinate this and help have these conversations either with the resident, their spouse, any other representatives that they want to have having the conversation to help kind of coordinate much of that. Again, we're asking residents, the underlying piece here is to not intentionally impoverish themselves. So don't give away all your money and then say, hey, look, I need assistance. Don't give all your money to your grandkids' college education fund and then say, I don't have any money left, kind of thing. There's a reality that when folks look to come in, they complete a financial disclosure application. The intent behind the financial disclosure, I want to say this very clearly, is not to say no to someone. The intent is to make sure we have a clear understanding and a baseline for where that resident might be, so that if they do need assistance in the future, we can kind of measure back against that and say, okay, that makes sense to us, or what happened. And also, it helps us make sure that that resident is kind of aligning their own resources with the entrance fee that they're looking to enter into. And in some cases, we do encourage residents and say, you know what, that entrance fee may not be the best for you. Would you consider some of these other floor plans or entrance fee plans that might help you preserve your assets a bit more? Because we have a mutually aligned interest for residents to try and preserve their assets for as long as possible. If you're curious here, these are just the last couple slides here. Monthly fees, we try and keep these really as low as we possibly can. They're not dependent on which unit you pick. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Bretton Woods right now, it's going to be about $980 a month. Raybrook is $983. Residents pay for utilities except for water. We cover within that monthly fee, I should say, includes cable and internet for our independent living residents, and then property taxes are billed passed through separately on each campus when it comes to independent living residences. Monthly, daily rates, if you're curious about these are all available through your sales reps as well. These vary based on levels of care. We have 5 levels of care, both in kind of non-memory care and memory care settings, depending on the acuity and daily care needs of each particular resident. These are Bretton's rates. They're pretty comparable to Raybrooks. Skilled nursing, unfortunately, this is where our rates currently are. That's where the bulk of our costs ultimately land, is in skilled nursing and assisted living. So you're going to find rates um, higher there. We do always compare our rates to where we find our peer communities at to make sure we're not out of whack with those, and we're still pretty consistent with those. Last couple additional resources here. These are all things that we'd like to talk about. Mike, on the sales team, I'm sure we'll encourage you to have a listen to all the webinars we've done. We have a podcast. We love the podcast. Make sure you only listen to the episodes that I'm on, not the ones that Michael are on, so I can get my subscriber listens up. But we really love being able to provide some insights from us. So that's it, Michael.
That's it. Wow. In just under an hour. So well
Wow.
done. We're going to let Adam get a drink of water or coffee or something there. And I'm sure there are some questions. Adam, thanks for that. I think it was very helpful to, again, see the big picture, but then get down into some of the details.
Yeah.
And I would add what Adam said, if the sales team is here to answer questions you have as well. Our team is pretty versed at, because this is what we do. So if we could help in any of those details, we'd be happy to. So if you have any questions, type those into the Q&A box. I see one question here. Explain more about the TIPA Snow program. Do you want me to do that, Adam, and give your throat a
Yeah. Go
rest?
ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
So TIPA Snow is a nationally recognized leader in dementia care. She came up with the positive approach to care in dealing with people that have dementia. You've probably seen her on the news. She's worked with some high-profile people like Bruce Willis and others that have had dementia. And so her approach and how you approach people with dementia and the like is really the backbone of our training here. So it's to be the first in Michigan and one of the first five in the country to be recognized by her is a pretty big deal. So, um, the next, will the slide deck be available for review?
Good question. I've not typically made it publicly available. I mean, that'll be a discussion, Michael, you and I can have
Okay.
probably. So,
I will say this webinar will be posted, so you can go back and review it.
oh, in some ways, yes, it is available for review.
Yeah. So in that way, yes, the this will be available. It will be posted probably early next week.
Yeah.
Um, how do you access the podcast and recordings of old sessions? So the webinars are on our website, hollandhome.org, on our resources page. All of our webinars are there. You can also access the podcast from that same page, hollandhome.org/resources. The podcast also has its own um, site called This Day and Age. So if you Google This Day and Age podcast, you'd be able to access our podcast there. So
There was one above that, Michael. You want to say that one?
yeah, I do. So this question, how will current Musk-Trump executive orders impact Holland Home's links with Medicaid and Medicare?
It's a great question. To date, we're not anticipating any significant impacts as far as we can tell. So what I say right now might be dated in an hour. I don't know. I know that we are positioned incredibly well to respond as necessary. From our standpoint, I started to use this term a couple weeks ago. I said we are incredibly resilient as an organization. We have an incredibly strong balance sheet collectively across the board, and we have a strong ability to pivot relatively quickly and absorb nuance where we need to and respond accordingly. The areas where actually candidly we might be most impacted is through anything that comes out of CMS and HHS as far as change in emphasis when it comes to the Medicare program, Medicaid, Medicare Advantage expansion, all of that. So everything that I've seen so far when it pertains to Medicaid wouldn't necessarily impact the population that we serve. The part of that question that didn't get stated was what are the potential impacts on Social Security? That is to be determined. We do not know. That is the third rail of politics, as most folks know. But there's been made mention in the last day or two. So what's crazy is this is being recorded. So it'll be fascinating to reflect on what I just said 2 years from now. But so those are all things that we pay very close attention to. But we have established a very resilient organization that we can respond relatively quickly. I've also used the analogy to say we will not be the first ones to feel a significant impact. If there's anything that comes out of something that's going to impact Medicaid and Medicare, it's going to impact other organizations much more severely than it will ours initially. So it's kind of a long answer that doesn't really per se answer a whole lot other than to date we've not been impacted by any of the activity that's been coming out of the current administration.
Great. Yeah, I would say our population are voters, are big voters, and I think there's not an appetite usually to irritate passionate voters. So
Yeah.
time will tell. In transitioning from independent living to assisted living, is the refundable given to the resident or held by Holland Home toward payment of AL fees?
Good question. So it can be either. Oftentimes we'll issue the refund back to the resident. But sometimes residents will say, you know what, just hold it for us and just apply it against AL. We have done either one, but it's often at the direction of the resident. It's not us saying, you know what, we're just going to hold this. It's the residents provided us some direction, typically formally in writing, that says, I understand that this refund is due to me. I prefer if you would hold it and apply it against my account. And then at the time any amount still happens to be due, you can pay that to me then. But by practice, by agreement, we'll issue the payment back to the refund as back to the resident as long as they're living, unless directed otherwise.
Yeah. So as Adam mentioned, the refund is due in our not Bretton Homes North notwithstanding, our refund is due in 9 months or when it resells. So if it takes 9 months to do the refund, we would look for you to pay your assisted living tab through that time if you have the resources to do so. So if you have to sell your home to raise half or more the money to qualify, how do you bridge the time of sale to the time of residency? I think maybe is this question raise half or more of money to enter probably because you've already
Probably.
qualified if we've offered you something. Um, I would say most, and if you saw our webinar last month about real estate, the real estate has bounced back. It was a little slow fourth quarter of last year. A few people I've just been working with, their places sold within a couple days. But we would work with you if there's been a little bit of slowness on the sale of your home. We do encourage people to list it as soon as you have a date here from us. It takes us a while to get your place ready. It can take anywhere from 3 to 4 months from the time you sign your design plan, depending on how much work is being done. So it would depend on how much work is being done in your residence that you're moving into, but those are things we'd work with you on. And most people, it's been a seller's market because there's so much demand and there's not much inventory, and the projection is that's going to continue. Um, so hopefully that answers the question. Do you want to add anything to that, Adam?
No, I think it's fair to coordinate with the sales team on if there are specific circumstances that might constrain from a liquidity perspective, right? Cash, we're relatively flexible, especially if there's good communication. This is one thing Mike and I have talked about. Like if there's really good communication between the resident and sales team, we're much more inclined to say, yeah, let's be as flexible as we need to get you in
Mhm.
to Holland Home. You've met all of the all of the criteria. You've checked yes, you want to come. We love that. We're gonna work to make that happen for you.
Yeah. Um, Next question here. Will Holland Home continue to provide inclusion services and hire based on qualifications?
Uh, Yeah, I mean, I think Holland Home has always hired folks based on qualifications. So we have incredible, amazing caregivers throughout the whole organization. We have incredible, amazing sales folks, IS help desk folks, all those folks. What I tell people in employee orientation is, first of all, I should say this before I say what I tell people in employee orientation. Our mission statement calls us to care for anyone and everyone who's in front of us, and that includes those who are providing care next to us. Okay, so that's an important thing to note. Our mission statement calls us to care for all of us, including um, uh, those for whom we look different, speak different, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so, but fundamentally, I say this to new hires coming in. If the mission statement resonates with you, then you're going to find this place hopefully as a place of flourishing and blossoming as a person and as a member of our community. So, yeah, I mean we've always hired based on qualification. We'll continue to do that. So, yeah, we're not picky or choosy from that perspective.
And I think if you look at our last report, our turnover rate here is very low, lower than national average. So
Yeah.
most people here have longevity. I'm hitting 14 years. We have somebody on our team, Cindy, who's been here over 30 years. These are not jobs that turn over frequently. Adam's at 8 years. Is it eight?
Yeah, I'm being close to 9 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of longevity here. So
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
we don't see a lot of turnover.
No, we don't.
Um, will Holland Home move away from electric stoves to induction stoves? Environmental issues and the ability of an induction cooktop to turn off as soon as the pot is removed. I don't think this is anything we've talked about.
We've not discussed this yet. Full transparency. We've
Yeah,
we've not we've not discussed this. We haven't um yeah had a detailed dialogue on any adjustments from that side of things.
yeah. I would say
That doesn't mean we won't, but this is it's
mhm.
not risen to the level of a of a discussion yet.
We do have residents that do have induction stoves that they've upgraded to that. I would also add we don't have gas stoves here. Everything is electric. So I'm not seeing anything else. Um, so while we wait maybe for another question, anything else you want to add, Adam?
No, I think I said, oh, well, I always say no, and then I say something. I need to stop doing that, right? Um, I always
I've
just
says the
love,
same thing. So.
I always love just emphasizing the mission and
Mhm.
what we do, and that's why I work at Holland Home. When I interviewed to be part of Holland Home, 9 years ago, it was the mission statement on the wall. That
Mhm.
was it. It was simple as that. I said, if that's the mission statement of this organization, um, then I'm in. Whatever we're doing, um, I'm in. Because if we're not just going to serve with love and and compassion. We're going to commit to excellence. Oh my word, we're our own harshest critic.
Mhm.
I mean, we pay attention to what others do, but we are obsessed with how we do things and how we can do it better. And that is a thing that I love about this organization, is that we're inward and outward focused kind of simultaneously. Um, and I love it very much. So, um, yeah,
And I would say, to dovetail on that, I think if people aren't mission driven, they don't last here. Um,
yeah,
and I've never worked in an organization where the mission doesn't come up every day.
yeah,
We've been in meetings in those rooms, and it's like, well, what does the mission say we should do? Right?
yeah,
Sometimes there's a margin that there's the margin is saying make this decision, but the
mhm,
mission is saying something else. So it's just a pretty incredible place to be part of an organization that's served seniors in this region for 133 years. Um, to be here at this time, it's a pretty incredible opportunity. So um,
yeah, yeah.
I
It's
know people have watched these webinars will have heard this before, but I think one of our biggest endorsements is that not only do residents recommend their friends to move here, we have a very high number of those that from resident referrals, but we have a lot of former employees that have chosen to move in. And employees know kind of what's behind the curtain. And we have a very high number of former employees that live here. And I think that's a huge endorsement to what we're doing. Do we execute things perfectly? No, but our mission says commit to excellence, not to
mhm,
perfection. So
yeah. I mean, we also try to be as transparent as we possibly can. We do that with our own residents who are residing with us. Like there's a regular feedback loop between me and our existing residents. Accessibility is critical. They're recognizing that we care deeply about the greater Grand Rapids area, but also our own campuses as well, obviously. Um, and so there's a deep commitment to making sure that we're able to provide good information to our existing residents, but also to our community at large. Because we want people to feel like they have good information. And again, it goes back to the initial point when first started. I said if you don't choose Holland Home, that's okay. We want you to choose a place that feels right for you. But if we've helped you on that journey, then I feel like we've done our job. And so we can hold all of those things kind of loosely. And I think that's okay. And that's a spirit that we carry forward even when somebody chooses Holland Home too. It's one of servanthood as much as we possibly can. So yeah.
there's one other question here, and I guess that maybe you understand the question, Adam. Please elaborate on the need to increase entrance fees with the increase in percent of the refundable amount.
That's a good question. It probably relates to, the differentiation between, 75, 25, 50, 50, 35, 65. You have the differing kind of gross entrance fee compared to that. Some of it is the way the economic model actually functionally kind of works from our perspective. We have to get a certain amount out of those fees. And so, part of it goes way back, This is carry forward from, decades worth of activity. Some of it is when initial buildings were built and we kind of worked through entrance fee models. At one point in time, I think we only had like two entrance fee plans. And then we've kind of added a third and a fourth, depending on your facility type over time. And some of it is as we look and model things out to say, okay, if we had a 1585, what do we really need to balance from an overall entrance fee to get to kind of a non-refundable piece that helps to support everything else that's going on in the organization. And that's kind of how we've kind of bifurcated from the 75% to the 35% on the non-refundable, that increase in entrance fee there. That's kind of how we've worked a way into it without getting into like all the nuance on how all of the nitty gritty behind the scenes works. That's that's kind of what's ultimately driven it is what do we need the minimum non-refundable really to be? If everyone chose that entrance fee plan, what would we need it to be
Right.
to help make things work? So some of that drives it is that sensitivity. So
Yeah. Susan had a follow-up question. Um, if one closes, this is dealing with the sale of the home, where would I live for the 3 to 4 month period to before occupancy for my new residence? Um, they're concerned about the lag time. So our recommendation, Susan, is that you don't list your home until you have a date from us of when your new home is going to be complete. So when you list your home, you could say, I'm just going to give an example. You list it today and say, I need to live here until May 1st. It's a seller's market, so the buyer will know when they're working with you that May 1st, I can't have occupancy of that home until May 1st. So um, I think that's one of the reasons why we've given advice to wait until you have your date here and then quickly list it at that point. Then your listing will show, look, because the last thing you want to do is move twice, right? I don't think anybody wants to move twice. So that helps avoid that. So and then what's the wait time to get in? And there's no wait right now if you want a 1 bedroom apartment at either Bretton Woods or Raybrook. We have availability. Wait lists, it's 500 to go on a wait list. So if you want like a 2 bedroom or some other floor plan, it will vary greatly, and your salesperson can help you with that as far as what you might be looking for. So um, if I don't see any other questions, I'm gonna thank Adam again for doing this for us. This will be posted on our website. We'll send out an email link once it is. If you have questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to anyone on our sales team that you're already working with. We'd appreciate it. Until next time, this has been At Home with Holland Home, and we hope you have an awesome day. Take care.